artists get a little selfish where we don't like to talk about what we do because we just want to do it, or we just want to pour our heart into our making. And I'm reminded the importance of conversation. So thank you for having me and asking me. I hope that I can articulate and have a little fun with you all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is so relaxed, like nothing crazy. We're both just, trying to figure out our voice as well. And it's just all about that conversation, like we said. And like I said, I think, as artists, we move our bodies and we make art, but sometimes it's hard to like actually speak and have a voice. So that's why I thought this would be a lovely opportunity to reach out to different artists and let them speak their truth or speak on their art and how they became who they are and where to go and all those beautiful things. So
go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I think what my job, when I looked at the questions and sort of this idea of conversation, I want to be like really honest and transparent. Please. And like, kind of no filter.
Yes.
Because I feel like we talk about this a lot, I think, here in Texas or in conversations, is like our paths aren't linear. They're a big old scribble. And so nice to like know that scribbling, you're not alone. So I'm going to try my best to be really like frank.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we want that. So
absolutely. Well, it sounds like we're all excited to just get into, an authentic, honest conversation. So real quick, just to kind of get the formalities out of the way. I had the opportunity of working with Anne-Marie when I was doing my undergrad work at Utah Valley University. We were on company together. And then I was telling her that me and you, we've kind of had the opportunity, this blessing to cross paths. But it's more been quality over quantity. We haven't, set a work together. We've just been in passing and had some really deep conversations in passing. So for those who may be tuning in who aren't familiar with your work, could you give us a little bit of a bio on what you have been working on for the last couple of years?
Yeah. So my name's Joshua Manculich. I'm currently living here in Texas. I identify as a mover and a maker. I think some people would say like dancer, choreographer, but I'm getting ready to turn 34 here in May.
Congrats.
And yes, thank you. But I feel younger than previous years. But I started in color guard in Tang Soo Do, and I did karate, and I was a marching band nerd, kind of like just throwing all of my hats into different parts of my like passions. I love music, I love performing, and I love learning. And so I thought I was going to be a chemical engineer, went to school to be a chemist, found out that I wanted to dance and to study movement, and that I could be so fulfilled in the academic and intellectual pursuit of dance. I went to Point Park eventually. I didn't know if I was going to have a career. Moved to Chicago, did some dancing there with a modern company that emphasized performance, choreography, and teaching. Awesome. And so here I find myself in this beautiful loop of making, moving, and like teaching, learning. And that loop has provided a really solid, sometimes financial, but also like just less selfish of a path. And so that led me to grad school, the learning aspect. And then upon grad school, I applied to some jobs, and now I find myself as a professor. And I'm like, how did that happen? But that's funny because I feel like a lot of people look at me like, Joshua, like why did you stop performing? Why did you stop like your professional career? And I feel like to this day, to this very moment, like I still feel like a working professional inside kind of like the beauty and infrastructure of academia. So I find myself in that loop of making, moving, and creating. So that's where I'm at. And I live in like a small town in Texas. And prior pandemic, like I was out making work with companies like Wim Wim, Ballet Austin 2, Eisenhower, Collage Dance in Memphis, which is, I have a lot of mentors, many different places. Yeah, so I make dances. I have 7 animals. I got married in Vegas. I eloped.
Oh, so how exciting.
And then just recently bought a house in Huntsville. Congratulations.
Yeah, so trying to do the life thing too, which is I think we'll learn like, in this talk back, sometimes we forget as artists to like talk about the life thing.
Absolutely. thank you for your introduction. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And this is Jam. I'm just talking for anybody else who is listening.
Tuning into this.
Anyway, let's see. I think to start off with, Jam was telling me a little bit about you and just how it just sounds like you're a very genuine, straight up, very like intellectual person. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're into like psychology almost, especially like kind of going into that. I would love to ask you kind of like a different question. I feel bad because it's not a question that was sent to you, but we can definitely go back on those. I think I was curious of when I heard about this is like, what do you think is like the biggest thing that dancers struggle with, like mentally, emotionally? I don't know. Is there a better way to ask that question? But
I think I can kind of piggyback off that question already. It's like, so artists in general, dancers, we open up ways of thinking, body, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and we open up those doors. And all the good processing can happen, but also sort of like the hypervigilant bad processing
yeah,
can, or like oversensitizing or going overboard. Like with being an artist, there's a balance, right? And so I think with dancers, what happens is psychologically and all those ranges of things I just talked about, we have to have peers and friends and family help monitor us. We have to have ways to monitor our powers that we gain being dancers and artists.
yeah,
You know, just like someone with a sharp tool, like they can carve the wood. Well, that's still a sharp tool that they can inflict harm with.
Yeah.
Dancers, we sharpen our tool, we sharpen our body-mind connection, and that connection has to be like monitored. And I find that with students, like they'll have like high highs and then low lows because it's that monitoring of that gift.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of. And so I think my interest in it is like, how can we continue to use creative processing, creative processes as a way to flush out all of that stuff that's coming up for us?
And follow-up question, do you believe that movement can truly heal like traumatic experiences, can heal like those toxins that we have? Like, I'm very interested in learning more about that too. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think, you know, even looking at a baby and like a baby, you know, fresh into the world, they've already moved. Like I call them like scientists, and like many scholars call them like scientists in the crib. Like our body and our nonverbal communication, like I think we don't even realize how much of a form of processing it is. So if you take someone that's maybe not feeling well and you start to move those parts of them around, like a lot of good can come from movement, right? And if you think about like at the end of our life when we stop moving, you know, like it's kind of a beautiful
Right.
thing, right? Like it's moving is sort of stirring up any stagnation. It's a form of getting through something that you might not be able to think through. So I definitely think it is like it's a tool belt for us to experience ways of getting away from trauma. I find like the hardest thing in my own family is when people have traumatic experiences, the last thing they want to do sometimes is move.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can we as dancers and choreographers reach out to those people?
Yeah.
And teachers, like, how can we get the people that feel most like sullen to move? That's what's interesting, right?
So interesting.
And I think that's kind of right on to our next question of traumatic experiences. You know, obviously the world is going through a lot right now. Just as you as a creator, we're one of the lucky ones. Earlier we had talked to Barry Doss, who was saying, you know, we're really blessed to be still creating. As a creator going through what the world's going through right now and also trying to develop yourself in your life, what is something that you do to keep creativity and to keep it fresh? And how do you stay creative personally, and then also with what else is going on in the world right now?
Yeah. What are your creative habits as?
Yes. Creative habits, finding new, like for me, I think it goes back to being a band nerd. Like there's actual music that like makes me want to move. And I think that we forget, and we have to apologize in dance world and music right world of like finding those songs that like just get you like pumping. Like Alex Ketley, like he has like that process called like hot mess. Like he'll get into a rehearsal and he'll like just jam. So I feel like we forget that jamming is like kind of an innate thing that we need to do. So when I get stuck, I think about like what songs are like my essential songs that get me moving. And I have several. Like I have Just Like a Pill, Pink. I have some Moulin Rouge songs, some Sister Act,
Yes.
some iconic movies, watching a good movie.
Yes.
And the power of like the creative moment might not strike you when you're in a studio. Like you might be folding laundry, you might be talking to someone and an idea comes, and kind of honoring like where those things come from.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I kind of wish I would have told a younger Josh is don't be afraid to make your version of what you see. Like, you know, painters, they all paint mountains, but it's not like they like steal like, oh, I invented painting mountains. They
Right.
all paint mountains in their own way. I feel like dance makers particularly are like, I don't want to make a piece to this because so and so did.
Yeah, we're afraid to repeat.
So I'm like, well, you're gonna make it the way you're gonna make it. Like not being afraid to be emulating people that you respect in your own way. I think that's essential. You know, like there's a canon, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, like people use canon. Figure out how to use it in your own way. So I think I wish I would have known that because I used to try to like pull things out of thin air. And sometimes you're able to, but other times it's okay to be like have a muse.
Right.
And so and that way
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
it just makes it more like a collective consciousness versus like me, like I make this.
Yeah.
There's so many people that flow through my like creative choices. Yeah.
Do you feel like that process helps you? Obviously, that helps you create your own style, but do you feel like your style kind of changes because of those different ways that you get inspired? Or do you feel like you have like a niche? Or are you that kind of choreographer that has like, I have this kind of style, and when people look at my art, that's Joshua's stuff, right? Or is it, do you think it has, I don't know, it goes through
That's
it?
it. Do you know what helped me with this question? So my last year of grad school, I took a painting class. And it was like so nice because like in the painting, I'd see like I'd make a lot of structure. And then at the end of every painting, I would like bleach it, cut it up, like do something really weird to it. And like it would make the painting like more interesting. I would like kind of put paint over it. Like there's always something at the end of the painting that I did that I kind of like resonated with. And then I looked at my dances and I'd be like, oh, like this is an okay dance. But then like a lighting design would come into my head and I'd be like, oh, well then this needs to happen. It's like at the end of my process, there's always like a kind of a step that helps me like think of my own work differently. So I think that's something that's in my head. But I will say in grad school, like I booked a studio every week for 3 years and I played at least for an hour, like in my own body with my own sort of relationship of ear to eye to ear and how sound comes to the body, how art is processed through it, how whatever I was going through. I do think that people make fabulous art when they have emotional things in their life.
Yeah.
I do. I think that when you have something really like in there, ooh, it might take a while to come out in the way you want it, but so I would say yes. I think that I worked on having a stylistic presence on my own body. And but then when I work with other people, I'm like, oh, well, this is my way of moving.
Yeah.
How can my form of aesthetic like bring out that person's gifts? So like it's a very careful like dialoguing that you have to have when you go to make, I think. So to answer your question, I'd say kind of, sort of, depends on like who's.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's so exciting. I love always hearing the creative process of other artists because we all have, that's what makes us special, is we all have a different way of seeing our art and making art. So I was just curious about that. Thank you.
absolutely.
I think kind of going on, I know we're kind of asking lots of weird random questions to you already, but I think this one question that I was burning to ask you kind of, and I want you to be honest, and I want, obviously, like you said, I'm really excited that you said that. During this pandemic, what has been like the hardest thing that you feel like that has affected you or affected your students or just affected your peers around you? And like, what have you learned from that? And has that kind of shifted your artistic thinking for the future? Like, have you gained more knowledge? Have you felt more defeated? Like, how has the pandemic truly made you feel? Because I feel like for me, it's maybe felt different for me than from Jam or whatever, but I'm just curious, like, how has it affected you?
I think for me, because I find myself having to lift as I climb or lift others up in terms of them seeking a livelihood in the arts, right? And there I was, like, processing all of the events this summer, the pandemic, seeing people process it even to this day. And I realized how much art, making, dance help people have a form of mental hygiene, right? So, like, what I mean by that is, like, um, it might not be a production, it might not be a performance, but, like, I feel like art is, like, essential, movement is essential. And so I learned that in the pandemic. And my frustration is, like, that we're worried about where arts will be in terms of performance and, like, ticket sales and all those things. But I think what I most care about is, like, wow, can everyone get on board that, like, my daughter needs to move in order
Yeah.
to process what she's going through, or my son. So in one way, I'm like, wow, like, you can't get what you get anywhere else but in dance or in movement. So I feel confident in that way.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I looked at myself like, why is putting on a show, like, so important?
Yeah.
Like, what is that doing to help people? And so I'm, like, really focusing on, like, being together in a space making something, however social distant, or if it's, like, in your living room, it's still really important for how we come to grips with what we're going through. Like the Grammys I watched on Sunday, like, I, like,
Yes.
watched it, like, I cared about it more because I was like, wait, what did these musicians say about this year?
Right.
What did they need? Did they need to make these songs to get through this year? Because I know, like, I needed to listen to some of their songs.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes art that much more like we need it.
Meaningful. Yeah.
So if anything, I'm just frustrated at the people that I know were worried about, like, the infrastructure of the arts, but I think we can hold on to the fact that, like, we need it for our own good.
Yeah, our own livelihood. That's why we live. I mean, we don't, I feel like for me at least, I don't choose to dance because I'm like,
Yeah.
I just want to do it. It's like I can't survive without it. You know,
Yeah.
it's an essential for me at this point. I'm that far in where it's like, no, and I want you to just explain maybe why you don't call yourself a dancer, because I love that idea. Because I consider myself, like, I kind of put this identity on myself that I'm a dancer, and it's such, like, a rooted thing that I am. So I'm just so curious of your take.
I think the words are so powerful, but I love the word mover and a
Yeah.
maker, because I want other people to, like, that aren't dancers to realize, like, you're a mover too. Like, I don't even care if you play football. Like, I love me some football and some sports, like, movement. Like, and so I think a dancer, maybe it's because I went to a conservatory and things were, like, really, like, just sometimes they had, like, a way that they needed to be.
Yeah.
I understand that idea, but I think mover is, like, more friendly to everyone. And I don't know, it just resonates more inclusive ways to reaching other people. Like, my Aunt Dorothy wasn't a dancer, but at a wedding she was a mover. Man, she could flow, she had, like, this role. And I hope other people, like my partner, he's like, oh, I don't dance. I'm like, no, Ty, you do. And, like, now he moves, like, he'll put on a song and he won't be, like, trying to do a step touch. Like, he lets himself kind of, like, go.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had, like, this hypothesis, like, that, like, that's why people get drunk in college or, like, go to parties so that they can, like, act silly and, like, dance. Like, you don't need to do that to move. You can just, you can go.
Yeah, humans were made to move. You can just embrace that, and you should.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, when do we lose that? And it's like when we're, like,
kids do
told
it
that-
all the time. Yeah. At what point are we told that that's not good, or we feel shame, guilt for that?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, what if, like, some of, like, I also think about, like, politics lately. and I look at the politician, I'm like, does that person move? Do they take yoga?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to follow anyone that doesn't do something for their body. Like, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that there needs to be like also like a comedy about our own bodies and arts function. I feel like we all need to meet at this place because it doesn't last forever, you know. So I think Mover feels really good, and I recently used that, Anne Marie, just because I feel like it's helping me just feel like more inclusive of everybody, for
I love
sure.
that. Yeah, it feels more that it feels more actually it feels more this than it does
Yes.
this.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay. I love where this is going. Thank you.
I
Okay.
love it.
I think kind of going into ooh, this is a good one. Okay. So, passion and dreaming can only take you so far. What actions or brave, scary conversations or getting out of your comfort zone experiences have you had to get to where you are now? Like, what's like maybe a pivotal conversation or a moment or something that you really had to go outside of your comfort zone, whether it be an audition or whatever it would be? What's like one of those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, if I didn't do that or I didn't talk to this person, I wouldn't have had all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, this is a really, really good question. And I think you find the answer to it when you travel
Yeah.
and you're like, I went to Norway by myself. My friend lived there. I bought like a sketchy ticket on a website. I get to Norway. I couldn't read any of the signs and I had to ask for help.
Wow.
Mm.
So that is my umbrella thing is like artists and people and strong personalities hate asking for help.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that can be the one thing that changes your career.
Wow.
Like, and so I think asking for help, whether it's like, hey, which way does this train go in Chicago, Norway, traveling, or hey, like you've applied for this grant before, what did you do? Like, you had success here, like what did you learn from that? And so, that has come up time and time again for me, where like I would reach out to people that have gone on through that process, and it helped me like make a peaceful decision, whether that was going to Ohio State for my grad degree, or taking class in Chicago, like trying Feldenkrais, going to yoga. I started lifting weights because I just wanted to kind of take care of, like, I felt like my posture like was always weird, trying that out. Um, Taking that painting class that was like super arbitrary, but like I felt like there was a reason. I like went over and watched the class. Like I just think doing like research and development before you dive into something, it often starts with a little bit of like asking for help.
Mm.
So
Ah,
and that takes a lot of being humble.
yeah.
Yeah.
And finding mentors, being like, hey, like I really am appreciating like how you are guiding me, and like seeking those relationships. I've always found wherever I've been, like I've been more friends with my like next generation than my own peers.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that it's definitely asking for help, even if it's like a train conversation and speaking to strangers. And Joshua, you're so good about that.
He
I
is
feel like how you how
just
you
so
speak
good.
how you speak to people, and like show that you like need some sort of advice or help, like that's, I feel like a very admirable trait that I've had to learn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely taken a lot of work, but it's the thing is this journey you can't get through it on your own, and you're going to need to network. And it's like, man, if you were the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I love being surrounded by people that like, oh, these people know what they're doing, so let me go find the people that know what they're doing. And kind of like what you said, like ask for help. And it's hard as an artist, because we're trying to develop our own voices, and we're trying to, you know what I mean, this is what we are, and it's like you don't know who you are yet.
Yeah.
And so as a young artist, how did you develop kind of your own voice, and how did you know that you were ready, and this was Joshua Manculich to
Yeah.
offer to the world? Or was there a sense, do you ever feel ready
Yeah.
to go out in the world and create?
That's so funny you bring it up, because like it definitely like there's moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But there are moments in my life where I've allowed myself to be like, yes, Josh, and stop stinking thinking. Like
Yeah.
allow myself to be like, wow, you worked really hard for this. Here's a moment, and like let it be. And so one of those was I had gone to Chicago. I saved up all my money to go to intensive for like 1 or 2 weeks. Worked at the flower factory. My parents don't come from a lot of money. They're like, why are you going to Chicago? How are you getting there? Like just kind of like pushing like why.
Yeah.
So eventually I got to this intensive and I worked with a teacher. I had lots of respect for her, like uber respect. And she came up to me after the show. Her name was Lizzie McKenzie. And she looked at me and she goes, hey, Josh, I just want to tell you, like, I've watched you working. There's something about your dancing that I really like, I'm drawn to genuinely. And I was like, whoa. So that night, instead of getting on the train, worrying about like my future, where I was going to go after Point Park, all this stuff, I like said, stop. And I was like, Josh, like, enjoy that moment.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I might not be on multiple stages or have these careers, but for this one moment, like I like connected with someone and they connected with me. And I kind of like did like a check in my head of like, okay, like I'm gonna search for that feeling again. And
Yeah.
when it comes up, like I'm gonna like let it be. Not trying to like make it happen again, but just search for that like, again, I had worked all summer for these 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I had put a lot of my heart into it. And so I think she was responding to my heart, if anything. So, putting yourself out there to train with people in different spaces to see like how like you are able to connect with people that might not be in your daily routine. Again, kind of a little bit of travel helps with that and helped me identify what I had to offer. And I think then like always learning mentality. Like I think some of my favorite dancers study philosophy or religion or cooking, or
Yeah.
they're like an incredible gardener. Like they have like these subsequent interests in life. And it shows up in their hands when they like do something. It shows up in their backspace because the way that they row or whatever. It's like they're like badass humans. I don't mean to swear.
No,
But
it's
like
fine.
and so like Chicago taught me about like good beer and burgers and like beach in the summer and like
Yeah.
like and so I think I kind of learned a way of like taking experiences and being like, oh, like that's showing up in my body and I'm going to acknowledge that and see if I can bring that to the stage or my choreography. And like I think Joshua, you're onto something, and Anne Marie, obviously because you two are together, of like surrounding yourself with people
Yeah.
that like highlight and like amplify your gifts.
Yeah.
Like I call them dream weavers. It's like when you're close to them, your dream feels like
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that before we logged on here. We always are just talking about how, like, I feel like, well, Jan was saying that you truly feel like in your life, you have every single person in your life feels like that, which is like, I think is a blessing. I feel like I need to work on, weeding my way through those people who are a little toxic, like, I mean, we all have those things,
Yeah.
but I think that is so important, because if you don't have that support and you don't have this, like, I feel this with Jam, and I hope that he feels the same.
Yes.
But there's definitely this like fire of like, when I get off the phone with Jam, I'm like, let's
Well,
go.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, like it's gonna be good. I'm okay. Like,
Yeah.
even though I don't, and maybe this is a question for you. Did you ever always have that kind of support, like with your family? Like, how was that dynamic? Or have you just had to, kind of separate and then go find your own circle
I
of
think
people?
this is the sad part for me is like it has changed because of my relentless like devotion to working and like making and moving. Like I've not that I've shed friends. I've had those friends that have been around forever, but I've also like trying to like take those relationships with you, but then to see the people in front of you.
Yeah.
So I absolutely have a mix of like the staple relationships, which I actually shifted more from family to like family made, family that you make rather.
Yeah.
My friend in Norway, like we see each other every year and a half. And like when we see each other, it's like, whoa, she's a Pisces, I'm a Taurus. It just works. I I think it also like transcends to like the women in my life. Like I had an epic grandmother and aunt that they were like just so cool. So I think like also like them teaching me like empathy. But I kind of am on the side of you. I can get a little spicy with the people I choose to like interact with. But I think what we're on to the conversation of like you can feel when you're around those people.
Yes.
It's just like a glove that slips on and you're like, whoa. And so like I wish I could have told Josh, like, sometimes you try to make it work, Josh, with some people, but other times there's those people like maybe you just haven't found your boo yet, you know? And I saw that with my partner and his friend from grad school. Like they just went like this and their bond is so beautiful. And I'm like, I have that with fur babies, but like, I'm still like I'm still sort of searching for my Texas boo. But again, I had so many people from my world, and I think now the challenge for me at 33 is like, how do I balance all those relationships and make time for them, and trying to like make work projects help me see my friends, which is fun. But like, I also should be able to be like, hey, like, do you want to go somewhere? But
right.
so I think to round out that idea is I think when when you know that person is going to help you or like ignite your abilities, it's like Harry Warner, my therapist at Ohio State. When I met him, I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to help me. Like, and I went there, it was more about like, hey, I want to just be like better at like living fully. And he's like, cool, let's do this. And I was like, it's like, it was just like, bam. And he became one of my weirdest, I guess I would call him a friend now. So being on the lookout for like when those things work well, because sometimes it's easy to live like lukewarm, like, oh, this is nice, this is good, but like be on the lookout for like those wow moments in friendships and work and like, yeah.
Yeah, I have a few things I want to ask. I don't want to like take the microphone
You're
too
my
long,
co-host
but
today.
as far as you had mentioned like things accomplishing things, I have a follow-up question, but the first question I'm going to ask, as young artists, a lot of us think, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and that equals success. Or when I start getting paid for my art, that equals success. A lot of us are also in college where there is a curriculum, you know what you're doing when you're doing it, and then all of a sudden we graduate and we're
Now
free
what?
agents, we're sole proprietors.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about the journey from finishing your collegiate process to becoming a professional? And then two, now that you're a little bit older and you're becoming a little bit more seasoned with your art, how do you define success?
Beautiful. Yes, yes, yes. So I want to say to two people like you that are doing a podcast, connecting people, you're already doing the thing that like I'm about to say. And so this is, and I think sometimes I need to be clear as a professor to my youngins and to my 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds. You do not need a piece of paper to tell you you're great or to make money. And if you're in college waiting for that aha moment, I'm sorry, but like one of my biggest like choreographic things that I've done was in grad school, like probably 3 or 4 of them. So it's like the waiting game just is no. Like you can do it. You can like go to school and be an entrepreneur. You can go to school and be making work. There's 3 months out of the year. So I love school and I love learning, but like we need to do a better job, I think, in the States of saying, hey, like you can teach now, you can substitute teach now, you can shadow now, you can find avenues of income that like help you feel more secure. That's how I found teaching in Chicago. I started subbing for friends. I was like, wait, I really like teaching movement, and sharing like ideas with all kinds of ages, like let's go. And so I think the curriculum, and my psychology professor from this semester, that she said, write this paper so you use it. And I was like, like,
Like what?
Turned it in for a grade. What do you mean I'm going to use this?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
And so like, I think I really want to, I think professors, our job is like give assignments that are applicable and like helpful. And that's like where we have to do our work. But like, I think that we can have our own mini self being like, hey, Jam, hey, Anne-Marie, how are we going to take this thing and put it into our life. If we're going to invest time in it, which, you know, like that's the one thing that we can argue, like we can all agree, like time is not promised. Like if we're going to spend time on it and it's worth my time, how can I relate it to what I bring to the table? And I think that that's like, you know, in the summers, I hope everyone remembers that summers, yes, they're a time for fun, but you can be making so many connections and like saving up all your like, you know, flower factory money to go to Chicago for 1 week and live that week like just, you know, robustly. You know, the business majors are over there networking and having externships. What's that for the arts?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so it's like, I know when I go to a commission or anywhere, I look in the room and I go, okay, who do I know? Because like if they're in the room and I want to be like, hey, like I know there's this room full of people, but like if I know you, like I want to also like grant, you know, give that relationship weight. So it's like that that idea of relationships being more important than, I don't know, the cattle calls.
Yeah.
I think those, what if the cattle call days are over and we like would work more on relationships? That'd be kind of cool. You know, like if I was an artistic director, I would want to like spend time with someone I watched for a week versus like 3 hours.
I agree.
And then maybe people would be more likely to like invest their money into stuff because like that has more weight than the cattle calls.
Right. Huh.
Which I hate saying that, but it just makes sense to me of like, the only people that I'm gonna you know, consider for the company are the people that like there's gonna be no like just random, I don't know. But who am I to say? Because I'm not an artistic director. But I've seen relationships, and the one thing that I'm taking away from my studies is like the village, right? Like the arts need to have a village.
Yeah.
And I think searching for the place that you want to live and like have a life, like that's always sort of nice to be an entrepreneur. Like New York has a lot of art, Chicago, LA, I love those spaces, there's so much talent there. But what about like the Boise, Idahos, the Nashvilles, the Kansas Cities, the Ann Arbors, the Minneapolises? Like those cities also need art. And so like I just encourage young artists that if they have aspirations to really make a difference, it might be better in a small pond than a large pond. You know, like Utah, like look at Utah. I feel like there's some incredible art making going on, but maybe it's because people know like, hey, like there's some space here for people. And it might feel saturated once you get there, but I'm thinking like it's a beautiful place to live. There's a connection to nature, to that part of the country. It has a, you know, it has other draws to it besides like just art. And I think that that's something I wish someone would have told me is like, hey Josh, where do you want to live? Like maybe you should go there that summer and like play around.
Check it out, and start building your village.
Yeah.
And I think here, go ahead.
Sorry, I really like you said that because I feel like for me at least, and you know, me and Jam talk about, you know, like where do we want to go? Where is our end goal? Not even end, but like where do we start? Yeah. And we always talk about Chicago. We always talk about like I moved to New York City for a while and then I had to come home because the pandemic took away my job. So it's like now that I'm back here in this small town, I love that you said that, you know, and I need to start thinking about that more. And how can how do we make this now worth it? And what can I do here to add art here and grow it here too? Yeah.
Because I think at the end of the day, like having a fierce show in New York and getting a good review, like that could feel great, right? Yeah. And those things that you do that you've worked hard for can be great. But I also think putting on something in your small town where people might not have access to the aesthetic that you bring and teaching them about what dance is, like that could have a bigger impact. I think of my grandmother. She didn't graduate high school. She had babies. She lived in a trailer her whole life. And I'm pretty sure that she'll have more impact than any of my favorite dance makers in some ways, because she had coffee ready every day. She had dinner. She played. We did Mother May I. She'd play hide and go seek and get like stuck. She's kind of a big woman. She'd kind of get herself into precarious places. But I'm like, I want artists to think about like, what are you doing with your impact with your village or your mine shaft or like your space? And I love I know New York has like a special thing that like draws people in, and people go there for that, like that reason. That's awesome. Um, but I think that, and Jam, I think you touched on this. There's stages of your artistry and your art making,
Mhm.
and I kind of like that. It's almost like, I think Adele and I were talking about it, a colleague here, like sometimes how you feel like you date dance,
Ah,
Yeah.
like you date your career, right?
ah,
For a moment I was like, oh, that's kind of gross. But then I looked at people that maybe don't necessarily have a passion, and I'm like, ooh, like, what do you do with your time? Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like sometimes I like, if I adopt a child or help a child in the world, like I want them to find something that like helps them not overthink life.
Mm.
Because I think that's kind of, we're in a place in our world where like we have time on our hands, and that time can translate to like overthinking and
yeah.
depression and anxiety. But if you're making a piece of choreography, that's much more, I think, just powerful than, or helping a student in a small town do that. I
Yeah.
think that makes a bigger impact than sometimes the saturation of the big cities.
Absolutely. I think that that's like something that's rooted me to start this. And I've asked Jam to help me, and he's been so
Yes.
sweet to reach out. And that's what's so cool is that connections and connections and connections, right? So I think that's like the biggest thing for me that I've just been wanting to like connect people together and make this village together. And
Yeah.
so I think kind of going off of that, making your village bigger and like knowing where to go. Because I know that you probably have auditioned a ton, because you're a seasoned performer. What is the best resource to find auditions? I mean, obviously that's a lot through connections, but like, is there a specific website? Like, what do you do for yourself to find auditions?
Yeah. So I think like identifying social media time as networking time and
Yeah.
saying that's separate from personal time, like to go on your social media and be like, okay, this is me like actually like working right now. And I'm gonna go look at these companies I'm interested in. And yes, it's personal because it might be my personal account, but like I'm gonna actually like do like 20 minutes of like research
Love that.
and like going to their websites, their stories. And you'd be surprised to find out how many like people too will respond to like the new forms of social media than when I was dancing. But like for example, like Eisenhower is having a audition, Ryrie Woodbury,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like doing your research, like, oh, like Josh, you've worked with these people. Like, can you tell me a little bit about them? Like, do you think what kind of uh, rehearsal process are these people in? Do they have like a classical aesthetic or contemporary, or there's a new artistic director? Like again, it goes back to your bravery question of asking for help.
Yeah.
And my job as a 33-year-old, like someone that has done some of these, my job in the timeline is to be like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to help you learn about these places and give you your best shot. So my age and my people of makers have a responsibility to like talk to the young artists. So like you have to be looking for those people that like are gonna be helpful,
Yeah.
and like and I think that and then when those people get my age and they're like really connected, then they have that rite of passage for the younger generation.
Mm.
So like looking for those people that like have lived in that zone and can give you, hey, like what do I wear to the audition? You've done this, and I think you can get a sense from like the visual culture that we're in for sure.
Mhm.
Right.
Um,
Perfect.
but like again, I think the last thing I want to say about auditionings for the young artists is if you can go there and if you can pinpoint like some companies you want to work for and have them see you in their spaces and they know your name, like I think that that's just like an externship and another, or like a for the pre-meds that go and eventually get hired in the hospitals that they have done their work in, the
Yeah.
same thing. So
Right.
to be in the room where it's happening.
Absolutely. I
It's
think kind of going off that just kind of a little bit more. And then if do you have a question to ask?
Yeah, you're good. Though. Go ahead.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
I because of COVID and because there hasn't been a ton of auditions going on, like I'm just curious from my own standpoint, what is like the best way? And I love that you said do your research on your Instagram, things like that, websites, people. But what are, if auditions aren't happening as much right now, what is like the best way to prep for an audition, or like the ways that you would,
Yeah.
I don't know, curious.
I actually, so I know there's like a handful of companies that I know that are actively looking, but like what about the rest and how do we prepare? Such great questions. I would say so empathetic. Take the empathetic thinking from an artistic standpoint and ask yourself, like, based on what you know of that company, what are they looking for me? You know, packing all of your shoes, your outfits, over preparing, going with the flow. If it's a Zoom audition, like, you know, practicing Zoom beforehand. It's like the preparation that you would do for any environment that you've worked that thus far in, like assume that that's going to be something that they need, and that way you're prepared for anything. I
Right.
know for me, I was told that like at the end of an audition sequence, the artistic director is going to want to talk to you. So like also like being prepared to like actually like genuinely say like, hey, I've researched your company, I can see myself here.
Yeah.
And so we got to use our artist imagination, and you have to see yourself there. You got to be like, okay, like, could I do this? And you know, when I was auditioning, I auditioned for Ryrie Woodbury, and
Oh,
I flopped it. It was a male audition, didn't get it. I auditioned for DanceWorks Chicago, didn't get it, but now I've choreographed with them 5 times. So that's kind of strange, you
wow.
know.
Yeah.
So what if,
Those non-straight line paths.
yeah, and I took a Greyhound overnight to New York to do it. I auditioned for a company that I had taken class with before, and then I auditioned for companies I knew I couldn't get, but I wanted to, like
Right.
that they're a little bit beyond my reach. And so like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to start somewhere. So like you two, like if you wanted to make a duet in the studio right after this and like submit it, like that, you're doing it. Like, you know, you don't need anyone to say like you're doing it. Like just like I can tell from how you talk about dance, you'd make some interesting crap. Like
You're like getting in my mind. How do you know? How do you know that?
podcast turned nonverbal. And so I feel like the permission slip idea, like why do you need one as an artist?
Who are we looking for?
Yeah.
And so I think because I also want to speak to like the future makers and teachers out there. I know really good teachers that are like 20. Like they just started teaching because like the teacher needed a helper. Again, I don't know if there's any particular age or piece of paper that's going to prepare you for those auditions. It's going to be like your love for movement
Yeah.
and like, this field.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so you know, we talked a little bit about your background, a little bit about your philosophy, and then we got more into kind of the actual tactile and actual techniques of, you know, what that would look like. Yes, and how that would develop as artists. I want to go a little bit back to the philosophical idea that you had mentioned at the beginning of like learning how to live. And artists are still, we have all this going on and we've maybe learned a little bit about our art, but now you're at an age where you're like learning how to live. And I wanted to bring it to the very first technique class I ever took with you, where you pulled out your bucket list. And it turns out you carry a bucket list with you every technique class that you go to. Can you tell our audience and Anne-Marie a little bit about that bucket list idea and how long has that been a part of your dance technique, and what does that facilitate for you?
Yeah, it's like, okay, so let's say on my bucket list, I wanted to be a Norwegian citizen by 2017. It didn't happen, but I've been to Norway 5 times.
Wow.
But I also had my parents saying like, well, why are you going over there? Are you going to be okay? Like my parents are so loving, but they worry.
Yeah.
And so if I wouldn't have put it on paper,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have put it on paper, Debbie and Denny would have been in my ear and I would have been like, oh, you know, maybe I shouldn't go. Or like I have on my bucket list, always have access to dance studios. Like when I moved to Chicago, I was like, I'll be fine if I just have an access to a dance studio. I'll be fine. So I wherever I was going to be a professor, I was like, I want to be able to have a space because I'm going to play. And I'm here today. I just got done playing. So for me, what happens is there's saturation of life, right? You forget these things that you have wanted, like intrinsically, you forget.
Yeah.
You forget like what 18-year-old Josh wanted or 15-year-old or 22-year-old. and it's sad, like just like how you like you forget about the power of some friendships. It's like in today's world, one of the forms of survival is connecting to yourself in
Mm.
different stages. And so like looking back and like this has coffee stains on it, it's ripped, like looking back and being like, what did Josh want then, and like how does that come up now?
Yeah.
Apparently on my first date with Ty, my partner, I told him that I like loved psychology and that I wanted to be like a kind of like a psychologist one day. And
Wow.
so like he holds me to it, and that's why I'm like taking some psychology classes. He's like, you need to do that. And
Uh,
so like sometimes unfortunately we don't have other people that to be our bucket list. Like, we're all busy. So
Yeah.
and you're in technique class, you're like, oh, should I go today? I'm tired, I'm injured. There's all this stuff. Sometimes some people are good about like, I'm gonna go, and other people need like internal motivation.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing we're all struggling with right now in the pandemic is like
yes.
motivation often comes socially.
Yes.
But and
Absolutely.
so like, so and so's going like, I want to be there. It's kind of like the healthy
Yeah.
kind of like, whatever. But that bucket list for me, I'm like, oh, like I said I was going to do that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's that reference to self. Because then too, like when you accomplish it, I'm like, whoa, like, okay, I've adopted a dog, but now I have seven.
Yeah.
7 fur babies. So kind of went a little overboard. I could have said
So
more.
fun.
So like dancers, artists, movers, groovers, like write down in a space some of your ideas, because we're not promised that they're gonna stay like right in that frontal cortex forever.
Yeah.
Remind yourself of things that you've wanted. And I think as a teacher too, like when students tell me what they want, I'm like, oh, like this group wants to be on Broadway. Like they want to do some crazy shit, like which is awesome. So like we're gonna do some cardio, like 7 shows a week. Like I don't know, being more practical about like if you say you want it, like, oops, here we go.
Yeah. So we're gonna
And
do
I,
this.
Right.
And that's what the
yeah.
goal is.
Yeah.
And we're gonna logically, what can we do to get to that step?
But I think for me, Josh and Anne-Marie, I have to focus on patience. So like I'm on the side of like activate, and like I'm working on like the things on my bucket list that require patience.
Yeah.
So I say all of that, but like just know that that comes with a little bit of a red flag of like I have a little too much on my plate at times.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think as artists, I feel like we like to try to put a lot of things on our plate all at once and try to be these awesome multitaskers because we can.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that this pandemic has definitely shared that, like, oh, okay, take it down all the wallpaper. Now, who am I? What am
Yeah.
I?
Mhm.
Now that,
And
yeah.
what did I say I wanted to do earlier in my life that like I forgot? Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
my mother-in-law lost her partner due to health stuff a while back, and like Michelle is like kind of living her best life, and she had to sacrifice some things for her partner because of health stuff and caretaking. But I looked at her and I was like, oh, I thought I was going to be worried about her, but like she had on reserve things that she had wanted to do, and I was like, okay, Michelle.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to give her a shout out. Like she has worked at a pizza shop for 20 years. She babysits in the morning. She goes on daily walks, and she's one of the happiest people I know.
Mm.
She's so solid. Like you like meet her and you're like, wow, like you're kind of happy. Like you're content, and
Wow.
like
Yeah.
she does her like I also like, ask artists like how we can lift those people up.
Mhm.
Like sometimes the stories are about people that have like crazy lives, but like what about like the Michelles,
Yeah.
the Mimas, the people that like are just solid humans? Like maybe that's something I'm interested in lately. But
I love
Yeah.
it. I
yeah,
think, Joshua, thank you so much for your time. I
yeah,
just want to ask one last question,
yes,
if you don't mind answering. I like to kind of end our little podcast here with this question to everybody, and it's just interesting to hear everyone's different perspective on what they say. But you kind of said it before, but I kind of maybe if this is a different answer. But if you were to talk to young Joshua, or if you were again back in college, or you were just graduated, or you're starting college, or whatever it might be, what is like one thing that you wish that you heard or that you could have known? Yeah, what would that be?
I'm gonna type it. Love your mess.
Ah.
I think that if you could just realize that your mess, the mess you make, like when you make a good meal, it can turn into something really like delicious and wonderful. And everyone wants. Love the mess you're in. Because looking back on my mess when I first moved to Chicago, etc., grad school, like I wish I would have enjoyed the first messy parts of that journey and maybe not worried so much.
Yeah.
Because again, artists were problem solvers, we're empathetic, we'll figure it out. But maybe if we could love that initial, that really exciting time, I wish, and I hope when I go through the next change in my life, I learn to love the mess a bit more and be like, okay, like I'm here, this is messy, and I'm gonna love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I got this from my friend in Norway. She teaches jazz over there, and she told me this. And it kind of relates to your dancing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All that stuff. Yeah.
Do you have any last words?
No, I just, it was so beautiful. It's such an opportunity to network and connect with different artists.
Yeah, it's
and such a strong, powerful soul. And so it's so cool to hear your view and your vision and your wisdom and your past. And we hope to maybe have you back again when we get this rolling a little bit more. But until then, sorry, go ahead.
I can't wait to be in a space, hopefully, when things are better, like, and we, us three can move. And I can't wait to return the favor. And it's been really fun. Just looking at these questions, I think you two are going to you guys are going to create, learn, inspire, and connect. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your energy. I can feel it. And it's like igniting this, like,
yes,
it's so good. I need it.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Absolutely.
Have a great, beautiful day. Thank you.
Bye.